Okay, so this video is going to talk about setup, a few things that are kind of our checkpoints or really important things to see at setup, some variations, and then kind of how you can practice it, and definitely some things you should look for. Now, when we're looking at setup, I want you to take most of this, what we're going to talk about, especially when we get into like ball position and alignments, as a guideline, right? But we will also discuss how can different ball positions affect launch direction, curvature on the golf ball, ultimately the delivery of the golf club and the club path, and how body alignments can maybe be used to influence your ball flight as well. But we're just going to talk generic at the start here, and a few things that I like to see. So first of all, when practicing setup, we need some feedback. I like to use this little T station, okay? So I have this white stick, which actually has a little template on it of where to place my feet, so my stance width, right, and ball position. And then I like to use the T or this other alignment stick running perpendicular. And you can use two alignment sticks, of course, running perpendicular so that I can manage ball position. It's a lot easier for me to see where the ball is in my stance when I have a guide down that shows me exactly where it is. Because yes, my ball position needs to change on a stock shot depending on the club that I hit, because all the clubs are different lengths. Okay? But first of all, outside of grip, which we'll discuss in a different video and how it can be affected, but alignment is kind of the first thing that I like to talk about. So target line, as you can see on the screen here of the simulator, there's like a nice dotted white line that's running from technically like our starting position or the bottom of the screen and the target, and they connect, and it's a dead straight line. And the target line would kind of run forever in both directions, okay? So when we set up for a nice neutral setup position, I want my body aligned parallel to the target line. So if I took an alignment stick, right, and I'll use the club here as an example, and I laid it down like that, that would be my target line. And then to properly set up this little T station, I would just take my other alignment stick and lay it down parallel to my target line. Now when I'm taking setup, and I want to go with a stance width that's about shoulder width apart for an iron shot, I like to go a little wider for a fairway wood or a driver, but about shoulder width apart for an iron shot. And then I want my wedges are going to be played in the middle, and the ball gradually moves forwards, right? So my 7-iron here is just a little bit ahead of center, but my thighs, my hips, my chest and shoulders, and my feet sit parallel to that target line. Now, I'm using this template or this alignment stick, maybe in your scenario, as a guide. I want to first make sure my feet are equal distance. So if my feet are square, I don't have one foot staggered ahead of or behind the other. As I flare my feet, that might adjust that a little bit. But let's start with feet, nice and parallel. Thighs, nice and parallel. Shoulders, nice and parallel. And that would be a really neutral setup position. Now, what you can see from the camera as I do this is you probably can start to see just a little bit of my lead arm above my trail, okay? If it gets excessive, you can see how my shoulders start to close. Closed shoulders or hips and or feet will influence or promote more of an in-to-out club path, okay? An open body, feet, hips, shoulders, thighs, whatever it may be, you can start to see how my lead arm appears below my trail arm, and that promotes much more of an out to in club path. So a good place to start is neutral, getting everything nice and parallel, but then you can start to change alignments to influence your ball flight. If you're somebody that historically comes over the top, I would suggest playing a little bit closed, okay, to help you feel that in-to-out club path, right? Swinging along our body and our foot line. If I'm someone that historically hits a little bit of blocks and hooks, which would mean the club path's probably a little too far from the inside, I might adjust my alignment, okay, to accommodate a less in to out club path or more even out to in. So start neutral, but then you can play around with open and closed a little bit to affect your swing, your club path, and ultimately the launch direction of the golf ball. Okay, so alignment is kind of covered there, and then we'll move on. So alignment. Then I like to talk about posture. Okay, so posture is really important as well. Posture to me comes a lot from how do I get over top of the golf ball. Now, first of all, if I'm standing nice and tall, okay, with my feet, I'm looking to feel balanced but strong. I don't want to be able to fall over forwards if I were pushed from behind or fall over backwards if I were pushed from face on. I like to feel about 55% of my pressure towards the toes or the balls of my feet, and then 45 towards the heels. So I'm just a little bit into an athletic position, more into the balls of our feet here, okay? And then how am I going to start lead foot versus trail foot is very much going to be club and shot dependent, but the way that I'd like to say it is for an iron, you can always kind of work on that 50-50 is a good place, but for an iron, I like to feel maybe 55 lead side, 45 trail side, so I'm balanced heel to toe, but I'm just actually stacking maybe a touch of pressure on that lead side. I don't want to see that for driver. When you get into the driver, I definitely want to see more 50-50, okay? So more balanced on each leg. And then of course you can see, as we mentioned earlier, iron stance width approximately. I like to get a little bit wider for the driver, gives me a little bit more solid base. From there, okay, an easy way to kind of do this is if I take my arms and put them out in front of me, I don't want to reach them, but just kind of relax them and hang them out in front of me. I'm going to feel like my elbows and forearms go straight down as I create a little bit of pelvic tilt, little bit of bend from the upper back till I hit the ground, okay? From there, what you can see is my shoulders are more over top of the balls of my feet. If they start to fall out this way, now I'm also feeling pressure into my toes. My shoulders get out in front of me. I'm going to be off balance. I'm going to have to get out of the way to hit the golf ball, okay? Vice versa, if I'm starting to sit too far back where my shoulders are sitting more into my heels, right? My spine is very tall. I'm going to have to go get the golf ball. And then you can see in both directions how that might affect the club path. So kind of feeling like the hips stay over top of the heels, the shoulders stay over top of the toes. I'll see a little bit of rounding just in my upper back, right? Just because that's normal. I'm going to see very flat in my lower back. I don't want to be sticking my butt out behind me, creating a little bit of an arch here. That's putting pressure on my lumbar spine. It's going to really create back pain long term, but it's also just going to limit my ability to turn my hips. I want to feel a nice flat back here, a little bit of rounding from the upper spine, shoulders over the balls of the feet, hips kind of over top of the heels. All right? From there, distance from the golf ball. Simple guideline. That same little drill helps right there just to get into posture, but at setup, when the ball is aligned, of course, in the center of the golf club, I want to see the trail elbow below the trail shoulder, right? So I have my good posture, got my good stance width, I got my good alignments. I'm going to let those arms dangle and feel that right elbow directly below the right shoulder for me as a right-handed golfer. So just trail elbow below the trail shoulder. So we got alignment covered, we got posture covered. We talked a little bit about stance, okay? And stance obviously is important, and when I'm talking about stance, I'm referring more so to stance width. The couple things that we can add to that and touch on is if I'm somebody who has a tough time rotating my hips, I can add a little bit of foot flare to create more freedom to turn either my internal hip rotation here on my trail side or my internal hip rotation here on my trail side or on my lead side, okay? So a little bit of foot flare can help you turn. But if I'm somebody who over rotates, squaring them off may help me stay a little bit more compressed and reduce that rotation. Now, everybody's going to be different, okay? If you're somebody who like naturally walks duck-footed, right, with the feet flared out, I wouldn't suggest squaring them off unless you notice a significant benefit. I'd like you to be kind of natural, right? If you're somebody who's a little bit more pigeon-toed, you may feel more comfortable and set up pigeon-toed, okay? But if you do have trouble rotating, that's when I would start to add a little bit of flare and change that up. So if you just kind of took a couple normal steps without thinking about it and then stopped, right, at about shoulder width. Well, you can see for me, I have a little bit of flare naturally in my feet, so I like to make sure that I set up with just a little bit of flare naturally so I feel good standing over the golf ball. Okay, couple other things to note, right? I will get more torque into the ground with a wider stance, but it does limit my ability to turn. So once again, similar to the foot flare, if I stand a little narrower, I might have an easier time rotating. If I stand a little bit wider, it's promoting a little bit more side-to-side motion, right? So maybe I want a little bit more horizontal forces. Maybe I over-rotate, and a little wider will help me feel a little bit better load into my trail side, okay? But will also maybe reduce rotation if I'm an overturner. Now, when you're making changes to your golf swing, and before we get into ball position, I always want you to look at setup. Static changes, first of all, they're the easiest to do, right? It's a lot easier for me to adjust an arm position at setup and swing from here than it is to try to dynamically change an arm position in the golf swing, specifically the downswing, right? Because it happens so fast. Now, there is times, of course, to work on that, but try to start with setup positions because it's easy and it always makes a change immediately, right? If you change ball position, as we'll talk about right away, it's changing ball flight on your next swing, okay? If I change my stance width right away, I'm going to change my ground interaction forces and how I interact to create a little bit of speed. If I change my grip, that changes club face position, right? If I change alignments, as we said, that may influence club path as well. So start with setup and then work off of that. Now, ball position wise, okay? So, and you'll have seen the template in this video as I did put it in here. But what I want you to really understand is, more so than anything, is the swing works on an arc, right? So the swing is really kind of working like that, okay? This will change, okay, based on ball position without changing my golf swing, right? So you can see here, if I place the golf ball further back in my stance, right, towards this side, the club is coming more from the inside. So I am going to launch the golf ball, for me, a right-handed golfer, more to the right or less to the left, right? That's how the arc of my swing works. If I move it further forwards, I will launch it more to the left. So how does that affect me? Well, because it's working on a little bit of an arc, this way our swing is further back, all things being equal, will be a more in to out club path. Okay? Further up, all things being equal, will be a more out to in club path. So when we're looking at, I have a 7-iron here, 7-iron for example, I like to play it as a guideline kind of off like your heart, right? So just a little bit ahead of center. Okay, for a right-handed golfer, once again, if you're a lefty, just kind of more on the inside of your right pec there, okay? So off of the heart. This would be my standard ball position. If I make the same swing, but the ball's further back, right, more in the center, I will hit it a little bit more to the right. I will hit a little bit more down on it. Okay, I may launch it a little bit lower, but the ball's going to launch more to the right because I'm coming a little more from the inside. Now the opposite thing would apply if it's further forwards. I'm going to launch it more to the left. I'm going to launch it a little bit higher, okay? And that's how that's going to affect my ball flight as I do it. So when I'm saying kind of lead pec area or heart for a right-handed golfer, that's a guideline. Start there. But understand how changing the ball position in your stance can immediately affect the launch direction, right? So I have the screen on here, and I'll try to, of course, easier said than done. I'm not a robot. Hit a couple shots from a couple different ball positions, and we can see how it affects. And I'll really exaggerate them, right, so we can see the difference. But so first of all, let's go just on a standard ball position here. I'll put it right in line with my 7. I know I took my T piece away, but I got a good visual there on my template. And let's just hit a stock 7-iron from a stock ball position. Now, it wasn't hit great, and the face was open, which is why the ball curved a little bit to the right. Okay, maybe a little bit nervous hitting for the video. Let's try one more. Okay, stock 7-iron ball position. Let's make a good swing here. Okay, we're gonna try one more. Little 7-iron stock. There, fine, good swing, okay? 1 for 3. So we'll see for me, as I'm working on my swing right now, hitting little draws, okay? So that ball was played kind of off of my heart, right? Launched just a hair right of target line, had a little bit of draw to it, which was good. We can see the push-pull, that was a good swing, 1.4 push to the right, okay? Let's see how that changes. I'm going to do an exaggeration. We'll play the ball, and I have that template to guide me, more where my sand wedge should be played. So kind of right in the middle or even a hair behind middle. Try to make the same swing. Let's see what happens. So I made a great swing again. You can see that that ball drew, so I feel like I made a very similar swing. But as the numbers start to appear, that ball was pushed 5.4 degrees to the right, so about 4 degrees more launch direction to the right. Okay, and that would also affect my angle of attack, and it was launched a little bit lower at 15.8, where the first one, right, that we hit well, let's see, this one of course wasn't hit, was launched at 16.1, so a little bit lower, right, definitely more to the right. Okay, let's go up to fairway ball position. So quite a bit more forwards in my stance, almost up to my lead foot. I feel like I already got to go get this, but let's try to make a similar swing and see what happens. Happy with the swing, but man, I have to go get that. Hit it solid. It's going to go a long way, as a pull typically does. But we had 5-4 to the right with the ball back. I was about 1-4 right with it in a good spot, and there was 6-4 left. So really significant change to my launch direction. That one launched at 14.4, drew a little bit more, so I might have closed the face a little bit more as I felt like I had to lunge to go get it, but definitely, I think, a good example of changing launch direction. The path does not necessarily mean ball flight, right? Curvature. So I would consider ball position changes more of a club path tweak, right? Further back, more from the in, further up, more from the out, right? That's how it's going to affect it. Your curvature is going to be based on face angle, which we'll get into in a different video. But overall there, like I said, get a nice template or something that you can set up and get feedback with, and make sure setup is dialed. Here's a really good example of, you could be making the same good swings you were making yesterday and feel like you're hitting completely different golf shots just because setup has changed, whether it be alignment or ball position or even posture, right? Because everything's going to affect the way that you move. So setup is ultra important to manage your game on a day-to-day basis. I would say every time you practice, at the very least, you should have an alignment stick down for alignment, right? If I am misaligned, I have to compensate my swing. If I'm trying to hit one at the target, but unintentionally I'm aiming to the right, well, I got to swing to the left to hit it back to my target. Well, that's going to affect the development of my golf swing over time as I'm reacting to the target. Vice versa, if I start to open up too much and I'm trying to swing to my target, I got to change my swing completely to get that golf ball on my intended line. when I'm different all the time, it's tough to be consistent, right? So take some time every practice session to set up an alignment stick properly. I'd suggest using the ball position one perpendicular as well, so you have that feedback. And make sure if you're going to practice, you're doing the same things, or the things that you can control are in the right spot and a consistent spot, so you can manage your golf swing on a day-to-day basis. So a couple takeaways from this video, okay? One, practice setup every single time you're on the range, even on a warm-up. Lay an alignment stick down and make sure you're aiming really well before you go out and play. Number two, understand how your body alignments, okay, can affect the development of your swing over time, but just immediately how you can change your ball flight potentially just by changing your body alignments, whether it be just opening the shoulders a little bit or just closing the shoulders a little bit as well. You can see as I do that, that also changes my head position, so that was going to influence things as well. And then to me, posture and stance width, really important, but once again, play around with it. Shoulder width for an iron and slightly larger is a nice guideline, but understand how narrower may be beneficial to you at times, or wider may be beneficial to you at times as well. And then lastly, which I think is the most important, and I would say the most inconsistent with amateurs when I play with them, is ball position, right? Is make sure the ball position's in a good spot, but also understand in the course of a round, if you're continually hitting pulls, move the ball back in your stance. You won't pull it as much, okay? If you're continually hitting blocks, maybe move it up. That might help you right away. And you can make that adjustment on the golf course, especially if you've practiced it, right, and experimented with it a little bit on the driving range. And if you have just the understanding of what it's going to do for you. So you can make tweaks on the course to play better on the next hole or right away, rather than struggling for the round and having to go seek out your coach. So use these drills and the time you practice to really dial in your alignment and make sure that it's consistent, right? Having a consistent alignment, ball position, posture, and setup position is going to be most beneficial to your swing long term.